Julia stood in the foyer of the Obsidian, one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city, clutching her small clutch bag like a lifeline. Her black silk dress hugged her figure perfectly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tonight was supposed to be her 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years of love, loyalty, and partnership. She had imagined a quiet dinner, candlelight, and perhaps a few tender words about their journey together. Instead, as she stepped into the private dining room, she saw her husband surrounded by investors, clients, and board members. It looked less like a celebration of marriage and more like a business convention. Her husband, Mark, stood in the center of the room, laughing confidently in his navy blue suit, the same one she had gifted him for his last promotion. His eyes didn't light up when he saw her. They merely measured her. He raised his glass, not to toast his wife, but to impress his guests. Julia moved through the crowd, receiving air kisses from women who barely knew her name but knew exactly how much her husband's company stock had risen this quarter. "Julia, darling," one of them said, fake warmth in her voice. "Mark must be so proud of you." Julia smiled politely, but inside she felt like a mannequin, beautiful, silent, and replaceable. Then she saw the young woman. Blonde, graceful, too comfortable for a stranger. She looked no older than 25 and wore a silver dress that shimmered under the lights. Julia didn't recognize her, but her mother-in-law, Diane, stood beside the girl, holding her hand affectionately. Diane, who had never shown Julia that kind of warmth in 10 years, was whispering something that made the girl laugh softly. Julia's heart sank. Something was wrong. "Who's that?" she asked Mark quietly when he came to her side. "Oh, just a guest," he said, pressing a champagne glass into her hand. "Drink up, sweetheart. We've got a lot to celebrate tonight." Julia lifted the glass, pretending to drink while her mind raced. Mark leaned close, his breath smelling faintly of scotch and mints. "After dinner," he whispered, "I'll need you to sign a few papers. Just some estate documents. Boring stuff." His tone was too casual, his smile too rehearsed. Julia nodded, hiding the chill running down her spine. He had no idea that the woman he thought was obedient was also the woman who once saved his entire company from collapse. 5 years ago, she had stayed up for nights restructuring debts, finding loopholes, and saving the firm millions. She had built the numbers he bragged about. Now he wanted her to sign something blindly. Her eyes drifted to the table where Mark had left his phone. It buzzed once, screen lighting up with a calendar reminder. Julia's instincts as a financial analyst kicked in. She glanced at it and froze. The notification read, 9:30 p.m. Proposal. Make sure Julia signs first. For a moment the air left her lungs. Her mind started connecting the dots. The urgent papers, the affectionate stranger, the mother-in-law's sudden warmth. They weren't restructuring the estate. They were restructuring her out of it. She looked at Mark across the table, smiling and shaking hands. He thought she was his pawn. He had no idea the game had just changed. Julia sat perfectly still, her champagne glass trembling only slightly in her hand. Around her, laughter and music filled the air, but everything sounded distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Her mind replayed the words on that phone screen again and again. Make sure Julia signs first. Her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. If she signed anything tonight, she would be signing away her life, her work, and every bit of security she had built. She had seen schemes like this before in boardrooms. Only this time, the predators were sitting at her dinner table. "Sweetheart, you look pale," Mark said, still smiling for the crowd. His hand pressed lightly on her back, but it felt more like control than affection. "I'm fine," she replied smoothly, her voice even. "Just warm in here." She forced a laugh, the sound delicate but cold. As Mark turned to talk to another investor, Julia's eyes flicked to her mother-in-law and the mysterious girl again. Diane whispered something, and the girl nodded. They shared a knowing smile. Julia had never seen Diane smile like that. Not for her, not once in 10 years of marriage. The message was clear. She had already been replaced. She excused herself quietly and walked toward the restroom, her heels tapping sharply against the marble floor. Inside, the room glowed with golden light, elegant and quiet, a small refuge from the noise outside. Julia gripped the sink, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked calm, composed, but her eyes were fierce. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "This is not heartbreak. This is a takeover." She ran cold water over her wrists, breathing deeply until the shaking stopped. If they thought she would break tonight, they didn't know her at all. When she stepped out of the restroom, her phone buzzed in her clutch. It was a message from an old contact, Hank, a former floor manager she'd helped years ago. His text was simple, written in all caps. "Do not sign anything tonight. They are pushing a hole on your name." Julia's pulse quickened. In accounting terms, a hole meant a huge missing sum, something they planned to dump on someone else. So it was true. They were setting her up to take the fall. She deleted the message immediately, straightened her shoulders, and headed back toward the dining room. As she walked past the hallway mirror, Julia's reflection no longer looked like a woman afraid. It looked like a strategist preparing for war. She slipped her phone back into her clutch, her lips curving into a faint, calm smile. When she reached the table, Mark glanced up, masking irritation with charm. "Everything okay, darling?" he asked. "Perfect," she replied, her tone light and unbothered. "Just wanted to look my best for the pictures." She sat down gracefully, looked him straight in the eye, and said softly, "Now, tell me more about those papers you wanted me to sign." The hunter was smiling, but the prey had already disappeared. Julia pretended to listen while her mind worked in silence. Every smile, every toast, every laugh around the table felt staged. She noticed how often Mark checked his watch, counting down to something. Her eyes drifted to the digital clock on the wall. It was 8:15. He had 75 minutes before his so-called proposal. She swirled the champagne in her glass, her reflection in the bubbles sharp and cold. "You look beautiful tonight," Mark murmured, loud enough for those around to hear. "Thank you," Julia replied smoothly. Her voice was gentle, but her heart whispered, "You'll regret underestimating me." As the dinner carried on, Julia began connecting the small oddities of the past few months. Mark's late-night meetings. His vague explanations about urgent client issues. The way he started copying her on work emails she had nothing to do with. At the time, she had thought he was being transparent. But now she saw it for what it was, a trail of blame being built carefully in her name. "You're too sensitive," Mark had told her once when she questioned his distance. "Don't make things harder than they need to be." Tonight those words rang like a confession. Her analytical mind kicked in. She remembered specific email chains about a failing project called North Creek, a venture she had saved once before. Recently, those same reports carried her name, followed by notes that read, "As per Julia's recommendation." But she had never approved a single one. "They used me," she whispered under her breath. They were setting her up as the one who'd signed off on false financial data. Her husband and his father weren't just cutting her out, they were building her into the fall. Julia sat back in her chair, her pulse calm now. If they wanted a scapegoat, they had picked the wrong woman. Her mother-in-law caught her watching and offered a cold smile across the table. "Family is everything, Julia," Diane said sweetly, her voice sharp beneath the warmth. "Sometimes, a woman just has to know when to step aside and let the younger generation take over." Julia's lips curved slightly. "Of course, Diane," she said. "And sometimes the younger generation needs supervision. Wouldn't you agree?" The smile on Diane's face faltered, just a flicker, but Julia saw it. That flicker told her everything. They thought she was blind, but she was already documenting every move they made. Julia's phone buzzed quietly beneath the table. She opened her secure folder and began cross-checking data. The numbers didn't match. The same maintenance budget appeared twice under different codes. Funds had been moved, hidden, and labeled as consulting fees. $500,000 had disappeared in 3 months, all stamped with her digital signature. Her stomach twisted, but her face remained calm. "Careful," she told herself silently. "They're watching." She closed the screen, lifted her eyes, and met Mark's gaze. He smiled confidently. Julia smiled back, because now she knew exactly how she would destroy him. The waiter poured another round of wine, but Julia barely touched hers. Beneath the heavy tablecloth, her fingers worked quietly on her phone, scanning through old reports she had backed up years ago. A name kept appearing again and again. Apex Global Solutions. The invoices were vague, marked as consulting and logistical support, all approved under her name. "Apex Global," she whispered, her eyes narrowing. She had never heard of that company before. Yet somehow her signature was on every transfer. Across the table, Mark was laughing at a joke he didn't understand, confident that she was still in the dark. Her mind raced back to the system she had built 5 years earlier, the digital signature key saved on the central company server. Only 2 people besides her had access to it: the IT director and the company chairman, Mark's father. The realization hit her like a slap. "They used my signature," she murmured. "They made it look like I approved those payments." A flush of cold anger swept through her body. They weren't just planning to betray her. They were framing her for corporate fraud. She sat straighter, her face a perfect mask. If they wanted to play corporate warfare, she would play it better. Julia's phone buzzed again. She triggered a fake alarm notification and stood up. "Excuse me," she said lightly. "My mother's been feeling unwell. I'll be back in a moment." Mark waved a careless hand without even looking at her. "Make it quick, honey," he muttered. As soon as she left the dining room, her steps turned sharp and fast. She reached a quiet corner near the coat check and pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts until she found one name: Marisol Vega. The last time they spoke, Marisol had been a forensic accountant. Now she was one of the best defense lawyers in the city. "Marisol, it's Julia," she whispered as soon as the call connected. "I'm at the Obsidian. They're using my digital signature for fake invoices. Vendor name: Apex Global Solutions." There was a brief silence, then fast typing on the other end. "Julia," Marisol said firmly, "Apex Global was registered 3 months ago in Delaware. It's a shell company. This isn't embezzlement, it's laundering." Julia's pulse spiked. "They want me to sign papers tonight," she said. "They said it's just tax restructuring." "Don't sign a thing," Marisol warned. "They're setting you up for liability. Once you sign, you're admitting guilt on paper." "What do I do?" Julia asked, her voice calm but low. "You stall," Marisol replied. "Buy time, spill wine, fake illness, anything. Then gather proof you never authorized those transfers. Your smartwatch, home camera, GPS data. Anything that shows you weren't the one logged in." Julia nodded, absorbing every word. "I can do that. And one more thing," Marisol added, her tone sharp. "You need an exit, another job before they destroy your name." Julia exhaled slowly. "Then I'll find one tonight." She ended the call, her reflection in the glass door steady and unflinching. The woman staring back wasn't a victim anymore. She was preparing for war. Julia stepped outside onto the terrace, letting the cool night air wrap around her like armor. The city lights glimmered below, reflected in the glass walls of nearby towers. Her heart was still pounding, but her mind had never been clearer. She needed time, proof, and a plan. As she leaned on the stone railing, trying to steady her breath, a calm voice spoke behind her. "Cold night for a celebration," it said. Julia turned. A tall man stood by the edge of the terrace, his suit perfectly tailored, his posture confident yet unhurried. It took her a moment to recognize him. Adrian Vale, CEO of Northbridge Industrial, the Holt family's fiercest competitor. "Mr. Vale," she said cautiously, "I didn't realize you were invited." He gave a faint smile. "I wasn't," he replied, turning toward her. His eyes were sharp, observant, the kind that saw more than people wanted to show. "Your husband wanted me here to witness something," he continued, his tone even. But I think it's you who deserves the spotlight tonight. Julia's chest tightened. You shouldn't be talking to me, she said quietly. You're the competition. Adrian shrugged lightly. Competition, he said, is just another word for truth from a different mouth. He studied her face for a long moment before speaking again. You wrote that Q3 market report for Holt Finance, didn't you? He asked. The one about hedging risks in volatile currency markets. Julia blinked. It was a team project, she said carefully. No, Adrian replied, shaking his head. That report wasn't written by a team. It was written by someone who understands strategy and compassion. That wasn't Leonard Holt's style. Julia looked away, her pulse fluttering. Even if I did, she said softly, that work belongs to them now. Maybe, Adrian said, but brilliance never really belongs to those who steal it. Julia felt the truth in his words like a slow, steady burn in her chest. So why are you really here? She asked. Adrian slipped a business card from his pocket and placed it on the railing between them. Because I'm building something new, he said. A division that believes integrity is still profitable. I need a chief financial officer who knows how to survive sharks and still come out clean. Julia stared at the card. It felt like a door opening in a burning building. There's one condition, Adrian added quietly. You must be legally and ethically clear. If you sign their documents tonight, you'll never be either. Julia picked up the card, feeling the weight of her choice settle in her hand. Adrian's eyes met hers, calm and certain. Don't let them bury you, Julia, he said. You're smarter than all of them combined. Just survive tonight. She gave a small nod. Thank you, she said, slipping the card into her clutch. You just gave me something they can't buy, time. Adrian smiled faintly. Then use it well, he replied, stepping back into the shadows. Julia took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and turned toward the restaurant doors. It was time to walk back into the lion's den, with a plan and a promise. Julia walked back into the dining room with her head high. The laughter had dulled. The air was thicker now, carrying whispers and curious glances. Leonard Holt stood at the far end of the table, his suit perfectly pressed, a thick leather folder in his hands. Before we cut the cake, he said with a rehearsed smile, we have a bit of paperwork to settle. He placed the folder in front of Julia with a heavy thud. Just a few formalities, my dear. You'll need to sign these for the company. Julia glanced at the folder, her expression calm. Formalities? She asked sweetly. Or traps? Leonard's smile faltered. Mark leaned close, pretending to whisper affectionately. Julia, just sign it, he said through clenched teeth. It's business, not betrayal. I'll make it up to you. She looked at him, eyes steady. You mean like how you made up for those late-night meetings? She said softly. His face stiffened. You're making a scene, he hissed. Julia turned to Leonard and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. I'd like 15 minutes to read this. We don't have time, Leonard snapped. You'll sign now. Then you can wait, Julia replied. Because I don't sign what I don't understand. A few board members shifted uneasily. The power in the room had changed hands. Julia took the folder to the lounge and began photographing every page. Her lawyer, Marisol Vega, was already on the line. They're trying to dump liability on you, Marisol said. Send me everything. Julia did, every clause, every addendum. Done, Julia whispered. Now what? Now, Marisol replied. You buy yourself proof. Create a record that shows you refused under pressure. Julia typed quickly. I am being forced to sign documents without review. I do not consent. She hit send to herself, her lawyer, and her secure cloud. The timestamp was clear. She had turned their trap into evidence. She returned to the table right on time, holding the folder but not the pen. Leonard's face was red, his patience cracking. Sign it now, he growled. Or you'll regret it. Julia looked around the room and smiled calmly. Regret? No, Leonard. Regret is for those who never kept copies. She placed her phone beside her wine glass. I've sent everything to my lawyer and the federal servers. Every fake invoice. Every forged signature. Even your shell company, Apex Global. The color drained from Mark's face. What did you do? He whispered. I turned on the lights, she said quietly. And I think you'll enjoy what comes next. At that exact moment, the restaurant doors burst open. Men and women in dark suits entered, flashing badges. FBI and say, gasps rippled through the crowd. Leonard froze. Mark stumbled backward, pale as chalk. Leonard Holt, the lead agent said. You're under arrest for securities fraud and conspiracy. Julia didn't flinch. She simply stood, removed her wedding ring, and placed it gently beside the unsigned papers. I don't sign lies, she said softly. The room was chaos, but she walked out calm and steady, her heels clicking like a clock marking freedom. Outside, the night air was cool, the city lights bright. Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian Vale appeared. The position is yours. Monday morning. Julia smiled. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't someone's wife or scapegoat. She was free.